think about ways in which the various movements for social change can find ways of working more closely together, I find that the most rational message I want to communicate, I think it's the most rational, is that there is no way we can solve the problems facing a very, very needy humanity if we don't tackle United States militarism. Because the military will just, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King likened the United States military to a demonic suction cup. The military will keep taking and taking and taking our resources. I mean, in the United States, taxpayers are funding a $717 billion military budget. And that's a conservative estimate of how much the United States military will cost people for just the year of 2018. But I think that peace is certainly not simply the absence of war. And whether or not you pick up a gun is not always a very relevant question for peacemaking. I mean, who's ever going to give me a gun? So if I say, oh, no, I won't pick up a gun, well, that's, so what? But I think peacemaking requires activities that are very much likely to intersect with the environmental movement and movements to address social inequities, including the movement to dismantle the prisons that are holding massive numbers of people in desperate situations in the United States today. What I'm getting at is that peacemaking requires me to ask myself when I get out of bed in the morning, what am I doing to try to live more simply? How am I trying to share resources more radically with others? Financial resources, jobs, living space. How are we thinking about helping the world to convert away from spending money on militaries and paying reparations for the victims of past wars and past enslavements? So living simply, sharing resources, and choosing service over dominance. How am I doing in that department? Am I looking to be available to help serve other people's needs, or am I looking to try and control other people? These are all essential questions for peacemaking, and I think they really are also at the heart of environmental justice and seeking to overcome vast income inequities between people. Sometimes I think it's almost like putting out brush fires. In my adult life, there have been multiple wars being waged at the same time, or you think that, okay, the Vietnam War is over. Everybody I knew was certainly saying they were glad to see that war ended. I didn't know anybody who would say, gee, let's try and do that again. And yet the military continued apace, overcame the Vietnam syndrome, and figured out ways to market war after war after war. And it's not as though these brush fires are starting because of trees that catch on fire or something by accident. Likening the wars to brush fires, these are deliberately started by people who profit from the wars. It might have been the case in the past that people made weapons in order to fight wars, but I think we're now in a situation where people make wars in order to sell weapons, and we live in a permanent warfare state. I used to say the national religion in the United States is shopping, but I don't say that anymore. I think the national religion has become militarism. And, baby vapors and camouflage, and thank you for your service to people on public transportation because they're carrying a camouflage backpack, the desire to make sure that the military enter the planes first, the military at sporting events, rappelling down from the rafters in a gym where there's a basketball game and carrying their rifles as they hit the ground. These are all ways in which militarism asserts itself in our everyday life, and then the budget to cover the expenses for the military is enormous, and the military lobbies representing companies, huge companies like Boeing, General Dynamics, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, they are able then to go into the universities, into the Congress, into the communities, and almost have a vice-like grip on education, forbidding the kind of education that would help us realize what essentially are the greatest terrors we all face, the terrors of what we're doing to our own environment, to our rivers, to our oceans, to our air, to our ground. And we need our resources to grapple with that enemy, if you will, the enemy that's posed by our own reckless overconsumption and contamination of the planet.